Accountability is rare. Welcome to Accountability is Trending, the podcast where we talk about transparency, responsibility, and the policies shaping Wyoming. I'm your host, Chris Hopkin, and with me is Tina Johnson, your co-host. Hey, Tina, how you doing
Hi,
today?
Chris. How we doing?
I'm doing great, great, great.
Good. So tonight we're looking back at the Wyoming legislative session. We're going to talk about the bills that passed, the ones that didn't, and what those decisions mean for the people across the state.
And joining us tonight, we have Pastor Jonathan Lange, who has been watching what's been going on with the House and the Senate. And he's been doing that for quite some time. And we're so happy to have you, Jonathan. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be on tonight.
All right. Before we dive into anything specific here on this legislation, let's start with kind of the big picture. What stood out to you guys about this year's legislative session, Tina?
One thing that I noticed is a lot of people are becoming more engaged. A lot of people have joined, they've started their own little groups. People are paying attention to taxes, education, the land use and the development, the energy that affects you in a county. And we haven't really seen a lot of that coordination and a lot of that input. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
How about you, Jonathan? Did you see that same thing?
Well, I saw something that, looking back over about 10 years or 12 years, I saw that the atmosphere in the Capitol was different, better, more. I guess I would say that God's name was spoken more openly. He was in the forefront of conversations rather than being whispered in the hallways, and that's not new this year, but it is a trend that has been building, and I think it's good for all of Wyoming that we're not trying to, stamp him out of the public square.
Boy, that's so refreshing to hear that. Thank you.
I noticed that as well.
Yeah, that makes my heart feel so good. And you just seen that uh, more this year than normal?
Yeah, there was, I guess, a couple of moments where I had a flashback to the first time I was in the Capitol in 2015, and it was way before the Capitol reconstruction, and I was just thinking about the different feel of the place, and yeah, so it's kind of
Uh,
something I was just kind of looking back over a decade.
that's great. That's great to hear. That's awesome. So, Jonathan, let's start with one bill that might have stood out with you this year. Uh, One that either passed or maybe because it didn't. What do you think about that?
I'm going to go with the one that passed, and
Okay.
that was House Bill 126, which was offered by Speaker Nyman. I just got to say, he's just the joy to work with. He's so open, so transparent, wears his heart on the sleeve. It's not something that I've seen in very many politicians, and he's really not a politician. He's just a man who knows how to get things done, and he is advanced to the Speaker of the House. But House Bill 126 was the Human Heartbeat Act, and it was necessitated because just a month or so before the session began, the Supreme Court threw out Wyoming's abortion laws.
We're talking about the Wyoming Supreme Court, correct?
Yes, the Wyoming
Okay,
Supreme
great,
Court.
great.
Yeah, and just a quick review of that history. So back in about 2022, if I remember right, there was a bill that was called the Trigger Bill. And basically, when people started realizing that the federal Supreme Court was coming near to overturning 50 years of Roe v. Wade, what the Wyoming legislature did is they put a bill in place to say that if it gets turned over, then we want to revert back to the laws that we had before Roe v. Wade. And so they laid it all out and put a trigger on it, and sure enough, it happened on the birthday of John the Baptist. It was an interesting day. The
Yes.
Supreme Court said that they were going to finally overturn 49 years of Roe, and so that triggered the bill, which rewrote our abortion laws to be fairly close to what they were in 1972, and but then days later, the abortion lobby, the big abortion, sued, and then it's been bound up in the courts since then. So we're coming up on over 3.5 years, and 3.5 years later, on January 6th of this year, the Supreme Court threw it out. They threw out all of our abortion laws, and that's what grabbed the headlines. But what people did not really understand at the time is that, so in order to rewrite the laws, we had to repeal all of the laws that were in effect prior to 2022. You had to kind of wipe the books clean and then rewrite them, right? And so there were two parts to the trigger bill. There was a repeal of the old and a rewriting of the new. Well, guess what happened on January 6th of this year? Is the Supreme Court ruled the new unconstitutional, but they didn't say anything about the wiping out of the old laws. And so, in effect, that stripped all of Wyoming's abortion protections, and just left us hanging. And that's why 126 is the most important bill of the whole shooting match.
Jonathan, I know that you've championed the right for life for so many years, and I know that you're extremely happy that this bill passed. Is this bill in its entirety something that you're really happy with?
Yeah, I am.
Good.
Well, I mean, nobody's going to be, in principle, you can't be completely satisfied until the unborn are protected at every stage of life.
Exactly.
And so, so in that sense, I wish we could go back to what the Supreme Court threw out. They were totally illegitimate. They were legislating from the bench, and but it is what it is. And so what we have tried to do with this bill is to take the language of the Supreme Court. The language the Supreme Court did admit in their January 6th ruling that there is a legitimate state interest in protecting the life of the unborn. They use that language, the life of the unborn. And so what they did not throw out the idea of protecting the life of the unborn. What they threw out was, they simply said that the state had not yet made a case that it had that legitimate state, or how, that threshold was met. So the Human Heartbeat Act was intended to say, okay, using your own language, let's draw a line in the sand and see how it goes. And the line in the sand that we chose was the human heartbeat, because it's very clear. It's a bright line that goes ba-boom, 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 and you can't miss it. We could argue all day long about what an unborn child feels. That's another way to go. But this is a very clear empirical approach to it. And so that's the big thing. I mean, so we drew a line at that. And basically what the law says is that before an abortion can be performed in the state of Wyoming, the abortionist has to test to see whether a human heartbeat is detectable.
Nice.
And if it's detectable, no abortion. If it's not detectable, it's still legal. Embryology teaches us that that the human heartbeat starts being detectable around 7 weeks LMP, which is about 5 weeks of pregnancy. You know, so anyway, that's a long way of saying I'm happy that the children are protected for at least for the last 8 months of their pregnancy in Wyoming, and now the ball's in the Supreme Court's court.
So I have another question for you. Is there any bills that you thought that didn't pass that might have deserved more attention?
Yes, there are a number of them. A number of them. Let me
One in
start with
particular?
the one that was most disappointing for me and frustrating, because it was such a well-crafted piece of legislation and such an important piece of legislation. And that is, it was written by Representative Martha Lawley out of Lovell. And she put together House Bill 117. It's called Stop Harm, Empower Women with Informed Notices. And this too was intended to backfill laws that were stripped away by the Supreme Court's just declaring everything unconstitutional. And because our prior abortion law had all these protections built in for women, because the abortion industry is famous for keeping women in the dark, rushing them into decisions that they later regret, not giving them all the information that they need, and downplaying, you know, what's actually happening. It's just a clump of cells, for instance. And so this, the Stop Harm, Empower Women with Informed Notices, it had two parts to it. The first part to it was directed at the abortion providers, and it laid out some bullet point that, you know, the minimums that you have to inform women about, for instance, where their pregnancy is. You know, you can't just go in there and start sucking things out without knowing whether the baby is in the uterine wall or in the fallopian tube or somewhere else ectopic. You also have to know things like what is the there's some technical things with the RH factor of blood. And if a woman's baby is a different RH factor than her own, there can be some problems not on that pregnancy but on subsequent pregnancies, and women aren't told this, and oftentimes they're surprised when they have a problem in a subsequent pregnancy that was never talked about. So anyway, so there's disclosure about that, and those kinds of bullet points that just give requirements about what women need to be told. But the
Well,
second part of the bill is about protecting a woman's right to a unpressured consent. So the first part is about the informed consent, and the second part is about making legal protections so that she can't be pressured into it. Pressure can happen in a lot of ways, and I mean, depending on the study that you look at, I have read studies where 90%, 9 out of 10 abortions, the woman says, "I only did this because of some man." Maybe it was her partner, maybe it was her father, maybe it was her grandfather. But because oftentimes men don't understand what's going on in the woman's life, but they pressure anyway. Well, this bill, and especially when it comes to all of the to human trafficking,
oh,
where pimps will do this, and especially with the abortion pill. And so House Bill 17 would have made some very, very strong legal remedies for the woman who is pressured by anybody, whether it be the provider himself or somebody else in her family, or even if it's an employer. Say, for instance, we're not going to give you a promotion if you carry this baby to term, or a school that says, we're not going to continue to give you our sports scholarship if you carry this baby to term. Those are the kinds of pressures that this bill would have knocked out. And unfortunately, it was one of the 10 bills that Tara Nethercott and the president of the Senate simply put to the bottom of the list and then let the time expire last Tuesday. And so it never came up for a vote in the Senate. And that's just totally unjust. Well, of course, we'll run it again next year. But for the next year, women are going to be not empowered.
That's one thing about the legislative process that unfortunately the general populace does not understand. And we plead to everybody to get more involved and with this legislative process to understand it. Um, and we so appreciate people like you that understand it and inform us. That's why we do this podcast, is to be able to get this out to people in Uintah County to get this, hopefully, to get this ball moving, to people to get involved, to at least go to the website and look at these bills and maybe uh, look at the legislative recordings, and see what goes on the floor, and be a part of this process. Everybody has their life. They're raising their kids. They go to work every day. I get that. But this only happens twice a year in Wyoming, and we have to be involved. We have to know this because we've had our head in the sand so long. That's why we are in this predicament that we're in right now, is because nobody has taken the time to even be bothered. And now it has become so corrupt that we've got all of this pressure on us that's needless, because we've got bad people in there that's done bad things to us. But I, it just is, it's just amazing that, it takes people like us to be able to have to get this out to the public. We can't rely on our newspapers. We can't rely on mainstream media. We have to have people like Tina and I, have people like you on here to keep us informed. And we so appreciate that, Jonathan.
Yeah. Let me just kind of extend on that. When I began watching the legislature back in 2013, that was the first time I started watching, and I was totally powerless. I didn't know what to do about it. I was just watching from afar using the legislative website. And what I immediately realized is that, when you're actually there in the Capitol building, it's like drinking from a fire hose, isn't it, Tina? I mean, it just, whoa.
It's overwhelming for sure.
It is overwhelming, and you oftentimes feel like, where do you even begin? And you can spend an awful lot of energy, emotional energy, and mental energy for nothing. And so one of the things about being informed is also helping people know what is the best use of their time and energy. And it takes some people, it takes some experience and some coordination of effort, so that we're not just, screaming with our hair on fire, but speaking to a particular issue at a particular time, in a particular place, and in a particular way that's going to have the most impact. And part of that impact is coordinating the timing, so that it's not one person popping off this week and then 2 weeks later somebody else pops off in the same issue. But coordinating that timing with key legislative moments. And let me just say, to explain to people about the key legislative moments, maybe you've already done this, but every bill that is ever offered in the legislature has to pass through basically 9 votes. And
Very complicated.
Yeah, and in a year like this, the number is 10. So 10 votes, and then it's still not a law if the governor doesn't finally put his signature to it. Um, so this one, the House bill, the Human Heartbeat Act, for instance, it has passed 9 gates, 10 gates, all 10. It's passed, and now it's sitting on the governor's desk. And if he vetoes it, it's done. So this is the place where you can write your governor and tell him to sign the bill, tell him why it's necessary because it's got to backfill all of these laws that were stripped away by the Wyoming Supreme Court, for instance. But anyway, so as we're looking at those 9 votes, there's 2 choke points, and there's 2 places that each bill has to pass through where they actually get to hear from the public. All the rest of them is debate that's happened on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate, and only the only people who can talk are the elected senators or the elected House members. But when it comes before a committee hearing, then the committee hears the bill, and they also take testimony from people all over the state. And people can drive to Cheyenne and testify in person, which is always the most effective. But if you can't make it to Cheyenne, now since COVID, we've had this wonderful option that you can sign up the night before the committee hearing and get on Zoom just like this.
Yep.
And they will give you 2 or 3 minutes to say your piece about whether you like the legislation or not.
So I want to kind of switch gears. Um, the one topic that's drawn national attention is election integrity. Wyoming's seen several bills introduced in recent years on this issue. Um, Pastor Lange, I know you're an avid fighter for election integrity. Uh, Tell us about your experience with this session.
Well, I'll tell you before we get into this that I tend to expend most of my energy in the off season for the simple reason that I cannot keep track of pro-life and pro-family legislation and also add on the whole thing of election integrity. But there were a couple of bills, election integrity wise, that were working their way through the process. And so let me see if I made some notes earlier in the year, in spite of my rule to not, because I am interested in this.
Well, I just wanted to let our listeners know, that we're being told by the mainstream media that there's no fraud, in the election. It's been free and fair, and you know, we're just we're just wondering, why the lack of transparency. That's kind of the main thing here. I know we're a part of election integrity group here in Evanston. I just wanted to maybe just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah. So there's a couple of nexus points when it comes to making sure that so the whole point of election integrity is that in a democratic republic, a constitutional republic, it is the people who are sovereign, and the people once every couple of years appoint who they want to represent them, either as legislators or as executors of the law or as judges of the law. And if the people's choice for who ought to be representing them is not accurate, then we no longer have a constitutional republic. We have an oligarchy of whoever's pulling the levers. And this whole thing about you shouldn't be worried about it unless there's some proven fraud. No, it's the other way around. The burden of proof is to make sure to prove that the elections are unassailable. It is not to prove that somebody has secretly cooked the books. So that's the first thing we need to get out, is just say the burden of proof is on the other foot.
Right.
There are a couple of things that are happening. One of them is the registration list. Wyoming has some pretty good laws when it comes to our voter registry. And one of those laws is that if you don't actually vote within 2 years of being on the list, your name is automatically dropped off, and you have to re-register, and that keeps the books from getting inflated over time. So that's a good thing. But I'll bet you hardly anybody in Wyoming knows that the voter registration list is not kept in Wyoming.
I
It,
doubt it.
it is it is farmed out, and I kid you not, it is farmed out by contract to some who knows, the data center in, like, it's either Oregon or Washington. I can't remember which. So it's an out of state data center that holds all of our names, and do we know the names of the people that are actually the techies working on that list? I have no clue, and
No.
neither does the Secretary of State, neither does any one of the county clerks. It's just we send it to there, and we just trust that these people are going to be, upright, on the up and up.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing which bugs me, is that we don't have accountability when it comes to the people actually doing the work. And the same thing goes then with the election machines. You know, it, Machines are great because they do exactly what they're programmed to do. But the problem is that the person who programs it is a person.
Yep.
They're not programmed by a machine. And
Yep.
that person can make mistakes. And once a mistake has been made in the programming, the machine will do what it's programmed to do, even if it's the wrong thing. And that's what happened in Weston County. There was a mistaken program, and so there were 1,200 votes that were for one of the most popular representatives that we ever have that weren't counted.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yep.
so we need
Yeah.
to have, and here's what the Constitution says. The Constitution of the state of Wyoming says that elected officials will be elected by ballot. The ballot is the instrument of transferring oftentimes powerful political power, awesome political power, to some individual for a couple of years. But the ballot is the instrument of transfer. Back in 2006, when we rubber stamped the existence of of counting machines in the state, they changed that, and so that our laws are no longer constitutional. Instead of the count of the ballots being the determinative factor of who's in power, we now have the official count of the machine is the determinative factor of who's in power. And if there's a mistake, if there's a discrepancy between the machine count and the hand count of the actual ballots, the machine prevails.
Yes. And
So
then, as we've noticed and witnessed, even if our Secretary of State has the need to look into the machine, it was very difficult for him to do that in that particular instant.
yeah,
He was eventually able to do that, but boy, what a process, and how hard it was for our own Secretary of State to go into that machine, physically count the ballots. And it's not possible for us, we the people that own those ballots, to even do it, period.
that's right. And I'll tell you this. I mean, I was sitting in the committee hearing for House Bill 52, which was our bill this year, which would allow a hand count when it comes to a recount. Right now, if a guy, he loses by 2 votes and he's automatically given a recount, all that means is you take the stack of ballots and you run them through the same machine. You cannot count them. And so this bill would have would have made it so that you can actually ask that the recount be done by hand. This was one of the ones that the leadership of the Senate deep sixed, and one of those final 10 bills that they refused to let go to a vote. But I started to say, when we were in the committee hearing on this bill, what was fascinating is that the testimony of both the Secretary of State and of the Executive Director of the County Clerks was that if it were not for the voluntary submission of the county clerks, we would not have been able to count the Weston County ballots. So there is no law in all of Wyoming that actually allows somebody to touch the ballots. And the only reason that the Weston County was recounted by hand was because finally the county clerks, after a lot of screaming and hollering by Chuck Gray, finally they cried uncle and said, okay, we'll let you do it.
Wow. That's what I'm talking about. He had to just basically put the arm behind the back and apply the pressure until they said uncle, correct?
Yeah, because there's no official law that can just override. If they wanted to continue to resist it to the nth degree, they probably could have.
How does that affect our election this year?
What's that?
How does that affect our election going into 2026?
Well, this particular issue, we didn't get it. It passed overwhelmingly in the House. It passed out of the Senate committee, went to the Senate floor, and Tara Nethercott and Bo Beitman refused to bring it up. So it never got a vote. And it just died because of lack of vote. So we've got to start again next year.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. So that was a big one for me. And when I saw that one on the list of bills that were kind of shoved to the bottom and deliberately deep sixth, that was disappointing. The other thing that was disappointing about it is we've been arguing with the county clerks about this issue for 5 years now, and this is the first time that the county clerks came on board and said we support this legislation. So we had not only the Secretary of State and an overwhelming number of people in the legislature that would have voted for it, but the county clerks were in favor of it too, and just a minority of the people in the Senate were able to kill it.
Well, in the essence of time here, I think we probably need to have you come on again and address a few other issues like education and well, we had probably about 3 more things that we wanted to address. But we are so thankful to have the time that you spent with us today, Jonathan. We just enjoyed the conversation immensely. Tina, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask Jonathan?
Well, maybe my only question is if you want me to kind of shorten my words.
Not at all.
I do. I really enjoyed this conversation with you both, and as you can tell, I make it my business to know some of these things because they're important. And even though I'm focused on protecting human life and the sanctity of human life, what became very clear to me in 2020 is that all of my care for the life of the unborn means nothing if when we change people's hearts and minds, that their vote doesn't get counted.
Exactly. Well, those were the 2 big issues that we wanted to cover today. And I knew it was going to take a little bit of time. And we are so grateful for your knowledge on this to be able to help people understand. And we want to encourage everyone that's listening to go to Wyoming.ledge, is it, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's WYOLEG.gov.
Yeah, we want to encourage them to read the bills for themselves and follow your elected officials and be involved in what they're doing. Tina, I'd like you to chime in a little bit here. You've been kind of in the background there.
Yeah, so my biggest thing is there's a lot of voices out there talking, and there's a lot of outside influences, the Wyoming Education Association, the County Commissioners Association. There's just a lot of different things. So I want people to really look at their values, and I want them to read the bills so that they understand which side actually is theirs, because sometimes they get confused about, who's speaking and who's fighting for what.
Yeah.
That would be my take on that.
Yeah. And just
Well,
to encourage people too that don't get intimidated. These bills are understandable. If you passed your grade school English class, you can read a bill and understand what it's talking about. So just dig in.
yes. And
Exactly.
I didn't, I, when I was in high school, I wasn't the best student when it come to English. I can tell you that, but I can read the bills and I can understand them. So I would like to remind everybody, until next time, we want to stay informed and remember to keep accountability trending. And we want to thank everybody for watching. This has been a long one. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.